Private Lender Podcast, Episode 11.
The Private Lender Podcast quote of the day comes to us from Benjamin Franklin, who said, "An investment in knowledge pays the best interest."
This is the Private Lender Podcast, the show that shares practical advice and know-how for new and seasoned lenders, from private mortgages on single-family houses to joint ventures on commercial projects and beyond. Discover details about investment vehicles that you won't find at your local bank or online broker. Listen and learn from private lenders and real estate investors, as well as from professionals and entrepreneurs, as they share the details, strategies, and the insight that allows for successful and prosperous lending. Now, get ready to increase your ROI. Here's your host, Keith Baker.
Hello, Lender Nation, and welcome to the Private Lender Podcast, Episode 11. I'm your host, Keith Baker, and thank you for joining me today. I'm excited to share with you today's interview with Kevin Bupp, but before I do, I'd like to thank the Private Lender Podcast sponsors. If you go to privatelenderpodcast.com and click on the Sponsors tab, you'll see two links, one for 713 Houston Area Real Estate Networking. It meets on the second Wednesday of every month at the Holiday Inn Express and Suites at 125 Airtex Drive. So that's up in North Houston at I-45 and West Airtex. The other sponsor is the Realty Investment Club of Houston, also known as the Rich Club. I've been a member of the Rich Club for many, many years. I've taught classes on private lending. I volunteered and served on the board of directors for a couple of years. And I still remain friends with a lot of people in the Rich Club and still do deals. I do a lot of lending to members of the Rich Club. And on Saturday, April 7th, I will be at the main event and trade show, the big meeting every month, the first Saturday of every month at the Rich Club. And we'll be discussing funding your real estate from using conventional institutional financing from banks and credit unions to private money lenders, other people's money, and also hard money. So come on out April 7th to, what's the address? 1001 West Loop South, Suite 550, Houston, Texas, 77027. That's in the Galleria area right on 610. And Buffalo Bayou, right on it. So come on out the first Saturday, and also come out to 713 Houston Meetup this Wednesday, March 14th from 6 to 10. At the Holiday Inn and Suites on West Airtex and 45. So if you're in the neighborhood, why don't you stop by one of those meetings and let me know what you think of the podcast. Say hello. Or tell me how bad I am. Either way, please come on out. I'd love to see the listeners if you're going to be in the Houston area. If not, don't worry. I'm going to try to get to other places in the country and ultimately the world. Kind of like Pinky in the Brain, looking for some world domination as far as private lending. But baby steps first. So for now, I'm just in the Houston area and looking to expand into San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, and then to go out of state. And speaking of out of state, today's interview with Kevin Bupp, it was a great milestone for me personally because this was my first interstate interview that I did. Kevin's in Clearwater, Florida. So, and he also has a podcast, so he sounds really, really good. And I'm just going to jump right into the interview with Kevin. There's a lot of good stuff that he shares, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So let's go with Kevin Bupp. We are honored today to have Kevin Bupp on the show as our guest. Kevin is the CEO of Sunrise Capital Investors in Clearwater, Florida. He's a serial lifelong entrepreneur. Used to own a mortgage lending company and now dedicates, I guess, most of his time to exercising, doing charitable causes, and buying up as many mobile home parks as he can in his neck of the woods. Kevin, welcome to the Private Lender Podcast, and thank you for sharing your most valuable asset with us today, your time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, Keith. I'm looking forward to it, man. Thanks for having me as a guest.
Okay, I kind of gave you a quick little intro there, but take us back. I know you had a paper out when you were like 12.
I did, yeah.
So you're a lifelong entrepreneur. You know, I say risk taker, but not like a mitigated or measured risk taker. You've several businesses you've been involved with throughout the years. So kind of walk us through from that first bit of, I guess that entrepreneur when you're a young boy all the way up to today?
Yeah, I don't know if the the paper route thing, I don't know if that was necessarily entrepreneurial. For me, it was just a way to legally get a job at age of 12. To have to be a work at a grocery store or work in a restaurant. I think you had to be 14 or 15 was kind of the minimum age, at least in Pennsylvania. I don't know if that was a actual federal law or if it's statewide law. I'm not sure, but either way, having a paper route was like the youngest that I could truly start making my own money, other than mowing lawns, which I did. We did chores around the house. I mowed neighbors' lawns and shoveled driveways and things of that nature. So did whatever we could at a young age, my brother and I, to make a buck, right, to make an extra buck. But the paper route was really my first job, and so not really entrepreneurial, but it taught me responsibility, taught me structure. I mean, it literally was a 7-day-a-week job. I mean, I delivered newspapers, Monday through Saturday, which was like the daily newspaper, and then the big Sunday paper, which, took a lot of effort. Had to like put sections together, and it came, various days throughout the week. And it was a good job. I made good money. But obviously it was short-lived. There was obviously other things that came along the way. But really, I'd say my first entrepreneurial journey as a kid was I was very intrigued by electronics and stereo systems. And so I had a brother who was 6 years older than I, and he always, he was obviously the older, cooler brother. And, he was obviously driving when I was, 10 years old. I mean, he was 16 at that time. And so I was always intrigued by stereo systems, like loud stereo systems back when you're like teenagers. And my father was always in electronics. And so he basically taught me how to install car stereos, build speaker boxes, and all that kind of stuff. So that was actually my first real entrepreneurial journey. I used to do that for my brother's friends. Before I was even old enough to drive, I was basically installing their, back then was cassette decks, and then it morphed into CD players, which are outdated still today. But,
Right.
But I install amplifiers and things of that nature. So that was really my first entrepreneurial journey, just making money on the side, my parents' garage, installing car stereo systems. And then just, moved on through high school, doing that for extra income. And again, similar things that most people do, cutting grasses, cutting lawns and things like that, side jobs. But really my first entrepreneurial venture, or I guess the second big entrepreneurial venture, was real estate, getting introduced to real estate. And that was shortly after graduating high school. I was 19 years old when I got introduced to real estate, and it was really by accident. I would love to take credit, Keith, and say that, I went on this journey of exploring myself, and, I read a lot of books, and I came across real estate and just knew that was the target for me. And that's not necessarily how it happened, although it became a perfect fit. Real estate kind of found me through means of a girl I was dating. Her mom was dating this older gentleman. He was like 20 years older than I, and he was a local real estate investor. And I befriended him. He befriended me, however you want to put it. And I found that he was a pretty successful local investor. And he essentially, long story short, he took me underneath his wing. He introduced me to real estate, introduced me to what it was he was doing. And probably saw a struggling, 19-year-old in front of him, wondering what I was going to do with my life, because I just didn't know I was going to community college. And he took me underneath his wing and essentially showed me the ropes. I mean, really, was my mentor for a year before I went out and did it on my own. So that was really my introduction into real estate. And that's really what I've done, for the last 18 years. I've had other businesses along the way. As you mentioned, I had a pretty big, successful mortgage company, a few other entrepreneur endeavors as well. But really my core has always been real estate. In different forms over the years, but it's always been real. It's always come back to real estate.
I can't get over the fact that you were 19 when you got into it, because when I was 19, all I wanted to do was drop out of community college, I wanted to move to Toronto and become a Rush roadie, and put together Neil Peart's drums as he toured.
That's awesome.
That was my goal in life. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. I am pretty happy with my my life, but I love that story that you were 19, you had the wherewithal to I guess. No, I mean, I took you under his wing, but you stuck to it. You had enough foresight to say, "Hey, there's something here." I don't know a whole lot of 19s. Maybe I'm just prejudiced on my own experience, but that I mean, going from, putting in kickers and Rockford Fosgates to,
Yeah. Right.
That's a heck of a story.
Yeah. I mean, I was tending bar part-time, so I was having fun. It was a fun 19. I was, having fun in my 19 and 20-year-old ages. But, I basically tended bar part-time and went to community college. And in my free time, basically, depending on what my classes were, and, in the evenings is normally when I worked my bar schedule. And so the other times, my free times, man, I was literally, David worked out of his home office. So I was either at his home office with him, just doing whatever he needed me to do, or I was like on site at one of his rental properties. I was helping him update leases, deal with vendors, contractors, whatever it might be. And basically, I was his sidekick. Tell me what to do. Tell me what you need help with. I'm here for you. I want to soak it all up, and I want to be a sponge. And it was really interesting to me. I didn't read a bunch of books prior to meeting him. I did. As soon as I met him, he introduced me to really self-improvement. He was a guy that introduced me to self-improvement, and he had a whole library of books and cassette tapes. Again, back then it was, you get 16 cassette tapes.
Yeah.
Zig Ziglar had all the Zig Ziglar cassette tape sets and all that. And he introduced me to that. And it was just, it was awesome. I loved every minute of it. And I just soaked as much up as I could.
And he was predominantly single-family residence. He
was single-family and small multifamily. Yeah.
Okay.
I think maybe the biggest property he had was like an 8-unit property. So,
Okay.
Mostly small, duplex. I'd say majority of his portfolio was single-family rentals. But he was always, the one thing he did teach me, which I didn't know any better, and so his model was long-term holds. Everything he bought with the intent of building cash flow. He wanted to live off of his rental income. And so he never bought with the intent of fixing up and flipping for a quick profit or wholesaling. Although he did both, his primary business was, hey, this is a great opportunity. It's in a great school district. Basically where I could pick it up at after I put, all the rehab costs into play, my ROI will be X. And he was always looking for double-digit returns. And again, he was looking to live on that cash flow. I mean, that was his life. He didn't have another job. He had at some point in his life, but he basically built this portfolio to live on. And so that's just really, that always stuck deep inside of me is, that's pretty cool. At any point in time, he could go take a 2 or 3 week trip and his portfolio would continue to produce for him. And so he wasn't always forced to be looking for that next deal. At least at the point in time when I met him, he wasn't forced to, if he wanted to take a year and not buy any more real estate, he would be fine. He would make enough income to support his lifestyle. Whereas those are out there fixing and flipping nonstop, they have to fix and flip the next deal. They have to continually move forward and do more deals. And essentially, they bought themselves a job, whereas for him, it was an investment.
That's key, too. I like that distinction that you just made there. It's an investment, not a job. That's cool. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you get, you're in at 19. I assume, like a lot of folks, you do kind of go the single family route. For a while and start spreading rings a little broader, maybe some multifamily. And I know now you are almost exclusive, or are you exclusive in the mobile home park space?
I still own a few single family properties, not by choice. But I guess
not by choice.
Not by choice. Yeah, there's still a few homes that I own with some other old partnerships that just
okay.
I don't really pay attention to them. They're just there, and they have renters in them, and we always make a joke that they'll be like, we'll have a big party like 20 years from now when they're paid off. In any event, mobile home parks is our core focus. We really. Us being entrepreneurs, myself, my partners, we're always, we have that built-in habit. Even you, Keith, you have that habit of chasing that shiny object, right? And I learned many, many years ago that was a good thing, but also a bad thing, right? And because focus is very important. If you really want to become an expert at something, whatever it might be, whether it's business or sport or anything else in life. You got to stay the course and stay focused on it and put the time in. And so this is what I committed to about 5 years ago. And this is all we have done for the last 5 years is focus on mobile home parks.
Nice. I like that. Yeah. The shiny object syndrome. Yeah. Just ask my wife. She'll tell you.
I know.
I'm sure yours will.
Yeah. It drives her crazy.
Exactly. Okay. So how did, I'm curious, how did you get into mobile? Like what was the mobile home parks? What was the kind of deciding factor? Like you said, okay, that's what I'm going to focus on. What were the reasons behind that?
Again, by accident. I guess our job is to really, let's talk about networking, because I feel like your network is your net worth. I mean, really getting out there and expanding your network. And, I'm always in a phase of learning. Like, I want to meet new people. I want to learn new things all the time. And so after 2008 hit me really, really hard. And up to 2008, I focused solely on single family and multifamily property, not mobile home parks, but smaller apartment complexes and single family. That was the core focus. Again, I liked focusing, and that was my focus at that point in time. 2008 hit really hard. I did take 2.5 year hiatus from real estate completely after 2008 occurred. Just 'cause, honestly, I didn't want to think about real estate at that point. It was a really rough time in my life. And so I focused my energy on a few other businesses non-related to real estate. But after a while, I realized that there was this burning desire to jump back in and to really rebuild what I lost. I mean, rebuild this empire. I mean, I was young, I was making really good money, and it was great until it wasn't there anymore, right? It was great until it wasn't great anymore. And so I wanted to rebuild. I knew I could do it with real estate, and I just had this burning passion for it. And so I went on this journey of just talking to everyone that I could. This is like late 2010, early 2011, that was still in real estate, but more so in apartments, because I knew that I wanted to do it with multifamily. Single family just doesn't, to me, it's not as scalable. The amount of energy and effort that you have to put into buying one great single family home deal is really the same effort that goes into buying a 100 unit apartment complex. It might not be apples to apples, but the scalability of buying multi units underneath one roof or on one parcel of land is a better use of your time, at least to me, than it is trying to go out and buy 100 single family properties. Okay. People will argue that point, but I've got my opinion. They got theirs. I like multifamily. So I went on this journey with the intent of speaking to everyone that was still investing in apartments, but not who just started investing, post recession, because those are different type investors, right? Those are the new investors. I also want to talk to those that made it through the recession, that made it through the downturn, and were still in the business, because the landscape had completely changed in 2010, 2011, as far as lending was concerned, as far as distressed assets in the marketplace. And so I just really wanted to know what was different. And as I went through this journey of speaking and meeting everyone I could in the business, I got introduced to a gentleman that was in the manufactured housing space on the finance side. He was in it for like 30 years. His entire career was based around manufactured housing finance. Well, he retired from the bank he worked for, and then he started buying RV parks in Florida. And I got introduced to him. His name was Randy Kilgore. And had lunch with him one day, and spent about 2 hours at lunch with him, not really with the intent of learning about I wanted to learn about his business, but I really didn't go into it with an interest saying, oh my God, I've been dying to learn about mobile home parks. That wasn't really the intent of the lunch, but I walked away from that lunch saying, there's something to this. Like there's something intriguing about this niche. And I think that it deserves more focus. And so at that point in time, I kind of committed to learning more about the niche, educating myself, and giving myself some time to either prove or disprove the concept. And so it took over a year to purchase the first property. And, here we are today, mobile home parks. That's it. That's what we focus in. Prove the concept. It worked. And we've been really successful at it. And I've had a lot of fun along the way. And it's lucrative as well, which is always a good thing. So mobile home parks became our niche at that point in time. And that's all we've focused on moving forward.
Cool. I'm wondering, along that path that you've come down, when were you introduced to the concept of a private lender?
Way back when. I'd say that actually the very first deal I did, the very first single family home I purchased, was funded through a private lender who I was introduced to by David, who was my mentor at that time. He was the one that got me into real estate. And so my very first deal was actually a local private lender. I can't even remember what this individual did, how he made his money. All I knew him as was a private lender. He just lent the money he had. I never even figured out where he made his money originally. But so basically my first deal, Keith, it was through a private lender. And over the years, David helped me establish some relationships locally there in Pennsylvania, but I only stuck around Pennsylvania for about 2 years, and moved down to Florida, which is where I'm based out of today. And so I quickly got dialed into the real estate market down here. And a lot of the deals that we that we find or that we bought over the years, single family and multifamily, smaller multifamily, were private lenders, wealthy individuals that had self-directed IRAs or other sources of funds that would act as a bank. So, I mean, that was a big source of our funding for our entire business. And, back then and even today in a different form today, but we are still very heavily involved with private lenders or private partners.
That's, that movie with Danny DeVito, talking about other people's money. I cringe to reference it, but it's, OPM,
absolutely.
It's a great thing. And so how does
it buys you leverage? It buys you flexibility. It buys you leverage. It buys you speed. It gives you a competitive advantage being a real estate investor. And it doesn't matter if you're buying single family homes, you're buying apartments or mobile home parks or any other type of real estate, but having access to private funds. I mean, we utilize leverage in our daily business, and we have a lot of bank loans and, so we use traditional type debt as well, but having access to that private capital, it's a game changer. Again, whether you're buying $40,000 single family homes or $4 million shopping centers, it is an absolute game changer, and it needs to be part of your business.
Great point. I'll take this out, but that was awesome. Thank you. Shoot, now I wanted to thank you and I just lost my train of thought. So with your mobile home parks, are you syndicating deals?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Kind of walk us through that. Like I said, I think most of the listeners are single family, one lender, one property. Kind of walk us through 30,000 foot view of a syndication on one of your parks.
Yeah. So I'll try not to get too in the weeds, but really there's two different types of syndications. Just, I guess, again, keep it at 10,000 foot level is there's deal specific syndications. And then there's blind pool syndications. Deal specific is what it sounds like. It's one deal. You're raising capital for one particular deal, whereas a blind pool would be that we're raising capital for multiple deals. Those multiple deals could be of the same asset type, so they could all be mobile home parks. It could be a mixture of mobile home, apartment complexes, shopping centers. I mean, it could be a mixture of all the above. We recently, last March of 2017, we launched our first blind pool fund for mobile home parks specifically. So no other asset types in there, just for mobile home parks. And we essentially bring on accredited investors. They are passive limited partners, so they're not actively involved in the daily management of these parks or the acquisition side or anything like that, but they essentially are a majority of our funding as far as the equity side of things. And in exchange for that, they get an ownership in our deal and also sharing the distributions as well. So they share in all the benefits of real estate, of owning real estate and investing in real estate, but they're not doing any of the heavy lifting other than writing a check, opening up their pocketbook essentially. So that's what we do. I'll give you the basic structure of it. Again, I don't want to get too far in the weeds, sure. But essentially our syndication is pretty straightforward. We pay an 8% preferred return to our limited partners, and the equity split is 60-40, 60% to our limited partners and 40% to us, which are the general partners. So to our company. And, there's some asset management fees in there and things of that nature, but that's a general overview of what it looks like for our investors that are partnered with us. I mean, really they're partners more than anything. I wouldn't call them private lenders per se, because they really are. We create a security and we sell them the security to be, literally a part of these deals with us. And they're passive. Again, they don't have any active involvement, but they are literally partners with us from the beginning all the way to the end. So they are along for the ride all the way until we divest of these assets that we purchased together.
Nice. A couple of things I want to touch on. So this is a different concept than you buying a single family house. I'm going to loan you $40,000 and you're going to give me a first position lien.
Sure.
These, like you said, these are limited partnerships. So the money that is being in this case, the private lender is investing is going to purchase a piece of an entity that is going to buy the mobile.
That's correct.
And
that's
so
correct.
Rather than having a first position lien at the county courthouse, you're on the legal documents of the entity, the limited partnership.
That's it.
And that for whatever percentage that they come in at. And also the accredited investor. I know that's a kind of a catchphrase. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, stipulates that someone who's an accredited investor is savvy enough to either have a net worth of $1 million, excluding their homestead, or make, is it 200,000 a year individual, 300 married, or something?
That's correct. Yep,
okay.
You got it right.
Yes.
Yep.
So basically you got to have some money and some savvy to get into the, like your blind pool fund.
Yeah, they figured if you've been astute enough to build up a $1 million higher net worth with your investments, not excluding your primary residence, or make that kind of income, so you're a high wage earner, that you're sophisticated enough to make decisions for yourself, and you don't really need the government get involved in that decision. That's essentially what it comes down to.
yeah, right. We both laugh at that. Yeah. That's I can honestly say I'm not accredited yet. I'm getting close, but I'm not there yet. So, but that is something for listeners to know if they I want to jump in Kevin's fund. Well, not so quick on that side, but.
Now that's just our fund, though. So there are other funds out there.
There are other avenues, right?
Yeah, you don't have to be accredited. So there's different types of structures out there where you might not have to be accredited to get involved in one of these syndications as a limited partner or passive investor.
Right, but that's more for the blind pool. Your deal specific syndications.
Well, no, either one.
Oh,
either
one.
Okay. Yeah, either one. Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Okay, because I knew there were some limitations. Like some funds you can allow up to $5,000 from non-accredited investors, or but like I said, there's other vehicles and other ways to I guess make that cookie crumble.
Yeah, and I've interviewed a few very prominent securities attorneys on my real estate podcast a few different times, and I don't know the exact episodes, but I think Gene Trowbridge, I interviewed Amy Wan, and can't think of the other gentleman that I had, but we actually go through some of the more specific I guess Reg D structures that are out there regarding accredited versus non-accredited, when you can have one, when you can't have the other, and all the different caveats that go along with each one. So if anyone has an interest, they can go back and seek those out on my podcast.
What's the name of your podcast?
Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow.
And just as a side note, the reason why you're listening, or the audience is listening to the Private Lender podcast, is because of Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow. I got turned on to Kevin's podcast a while ago, and if you can't see, I'm geeking out over here still talking to you right now. So yeah, but it's a great resource for, I think, okay, not so much single family. You will touch on single family, but more of that kind of elevated level of sophistication, I think. But you keep it pretty.
It's mostly commercial. You know, and commercial can mean many different things. Again, apartment complexes, mobile home parks, shopping centers. I've had a couple car wash guys on there recently, which is pretty cool. That's a very interesting business, very lucrative if you do it right. Yeah. Self-storage, office buildings, assisted living. I mean, list goes on and on, but what we try to stay away from, Keith, nothing wrong with it, so no offense to you guys, we try to stay away from single family, and only because there's 50 other podcasts out there that speak about single family investing. So
absolutely.
And it's not really our niche either. Our niche is on the commercial side.
And I think a lot of people, start out with single family because it's the old adage, invest in what you know. Well, everyone lives somewhere, right? Everyone's probably going to grow up in a house at some point, whether it was owned or rented. And to me, it's kind of the same thing. You get into it, you start with single family, and then, you want to move on up. Or some people, I mean, I know guys here in Houston that, they're happy with what they do. I know a guy.
I agree with you.
All he wants is empty lots. He goes, I don't like people. I'm like, well, if you don't like people, you're in the wrong business. But he, and another guy who does, he's an empty lot specialist as well. And he's, made a killing. So, to each his own, definitely. But I like how
there's 1,001 different ways to make money in real estate. And that's why it's, I think the important thing, Keith, is just figuring out what it is you actually have an interest in and just focusing on it, becoming the expert in, whether it's buying vacant lots or vacant land, parcels of land, or mobile home parks, or single family flips, or single family wholesales, whatever it is, just pick one, get really good at it and make some darn money. That's what it comes down to.
Absolutely. I agree. Niche down and be the big fish in the smaller pond. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's why I'm a horrible landlord. Okay. My first flip was it was a house hack. It took me 8 years plus a flood. Thank you, National Insurance Flood Program, or National Flood Insurance Program, that they paid to upgrade my house. So, but it took a while. But lending is, I basically failed math, through high school and hated numbers and who wants to do finance. And lo and behold, this is what I like. I love lending money and talking about it. So I couldn't agree with you more, find what you want and focus.
Yep. Absolutely.
I'm curious if you willing to share like your worst investor mistake you've ever made, or where a loan has gone bad for you?
I mean, I'm trying to think of a specific deal. I mean, I guess I try to take a high level approach to this, not to avoid any specific deals. I can't really just think of one off the top of my head that was like a really, really bad deal. But I would say that, and this is nothing against single family homes. It isn't. It's just I've got a preference, and that's on the multifamily side. But I'd mentioned earlier, scalability as far as the ability to scale and build a large portfolio of single family home versus multifamily, apartment complexes, or you could still classify mobile home parks as multifamily. And I'd say if I would have known better, if I would have had some advice from someone like me, giving it to myself back when I was just getting started buying single family homes, I don't know if that was a mistake buying single family, because I learned a lot and I made good money and it was a lot of fun. But I wish I would have dove into larger properties sooner, and really focused on multifamily instead of spending so many years on the single family side. So I know it's not really an exact answer to your question of like biggest mistake. I guess, I'm going to try to answer your question. A big mistake that we made is that we own a lot of real estate here in Florida. And although we were cash flow investors, we were also equally investors that focused on appreciation. And so I would say there was probably certain times that we lied to ourselves about our formula of, does this deal make sense from strictly a cash flow perspective? I'm speaking to single family homes back in, 2003, 2004 era. And this is back when Florida was literally appreciating by double digits every year in, year out you could literally be a waitress with no vocabulary whatsoever and make $100,000 flipping a home. You just, nothing against waitresses, but I'm saying you didn't have to have any experience in real estate whatsoever to make money. And so I'd say the biggest mistake that I think that we made back then is paying too much attention to the appreciation aspect. It looks great when you start trying to, you run the numbers on what are my properties worth today? What are they worth tomorrow? Oh my God, this keeps going. They're going to be worth this much money, but that's all fake money. Like equity really is funny money. I mean, it's monopoly money because you can't spend it until you actually have it, right? It doesn't do anything on your, on your personal financial statement. That doesn't mean you can't take that to the bank. Right. And so, not focusing 100% on cash flow and thinking of appreciation as an icing on cake was a big mistake for us. We were cash flow investors, but not like we are today. Today, first and foremost, it is cash flow. It is all cash flow. And we are value-added investors, so we like building appreciation in there. We like forcing appreciation by whether it's improving the operations of a property or raising rents or doing infill. But it's all icing on the cake. We underwrite the deals on the cash flow that they produce in the return, not what they can be 5 years from now. And so I don't know if that was enough of a detailed mistake that you were looking for, but I hope that was helpful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's helpful because I was just recording another episode, and even if somebody comes to me with a flip, whether it be, houses I've loaned on, flip houses on small commercial convenience stores, restaurants, these things. And I always want to know, they say, I'm flipping. Okay. Well, what's the cash flow? If you have to hold on to it, what's it going to cash flow? That's the starting point, because if it'll cash flow, okay. And even if that investor screws it up, does a horrible, botches it or whatever, how contractors are, leave in the middle of the project and have to get another one and it costs more. If he has to hold on to that, if my money's going to be tied up a little longer, can that property sustain itself until my loan is, I'm cashed out, refinanced out or whatever the case may be. So I am glad that you mentioned that. And it actually made me think of another question in the commercial realm. Do banks treat mobile home parks different than other commercial assets?
It depends on the bank. That's actually a really good question. It's probably one of the biggest challenges in our industry. Every bank out there and their brother are like throwing silly money at apartment complexes. Like multifamily is like the flavor of the the decade, call it. And
well, you've heard of Dallas Fort Worth, have you? Okay,
yeah, right. No, I mean, it pretty much runs rampant across the United States as far as like getting money on a multifamily property. I've seen some really silly loan programs out there, like 85% loan to value, 5 years interest only, a bunch of cash back at closing for improvements, all kinds of stuff like that, which that just doesn't happen in mobile home park space. And so what you run into in the mobile home park space is that it can sometimes be like the wild, wild west, where, we go in certain markets and there's multiple banks that get the concept. They understand the business. They'll underwrite it as an income producing property. Everything is fine. Then there's other banks or other markets, literally like the entire market. You go to every bank in that market and they literally view it completely differently. They either just don't like it at all. They're like, no way, never a mobile home park. And they really don't have any statistical data to base that on. They're just like, we don't lend on mobile home parks. Or they'll consider it to be raw land, being that these homes are mobile, although they're not really. It takes a lot of money and time to move them. It's pretty hard to move them. They look at it as like, well, that's just really a raw piece of land with some improvements. And it just happens to have some mobile homes on top of it. But they won't view it as a income producing asset, and it makes it very challenging to get a loan on something that they won't look at the actual income derived from that investment, because typically most of the parks that we buy, they're worth way more as a mobile home park, as an income producing property, than they are as raw land. We're not speculative buyers, so we don't like buy mobile home parks in the middle of a city where it's like on a really popular intersection where there could be a gas station in the future or a shopping center. We're not buying stuff like that. We're buying stuff that's in great markets, but the highest and best use today is a mobile home park, and it would never qualify for a loan as just raw land. And so to answer your question, it's good and bad. It's bad because it's frustrating sometimes. But on the flip side of that, I guess it can be good because it keeps some people out of this business, right? It creates a barrier to entry, a little bit more of a challenge to get financing. And so with that being said, the one cool thing that has come out of it, and not on every deal that we've done, but we're pretty good at getting it if it's available, is owner financing. So a lot of times we've been able to talk the owners that own these properties, assuming they own it free and clear, which a lot of times they do. We're buying a lot of times from mom and pops that have owned them for 20, 30 years, sometimes even longer than that. And it lends the ability for them to actually carry paper on the property, which is our favorite situation. Like I would take owner financing, even if the rate was higher and the terms weren't as great. I would pretty much take it for the most part over traditional debt. Probably 98% of the time.
Yeah, I think it's one of the great wonders of the world, actually.
Yeah, it really is. It really, it's a win-win for both sides. A lot of the owners that we're buying from, again, they've owned it for a long time. They fully depreciate the asset, so they literally have their tax basis is non-existent, and for them, it helps them mitigate their capital gains exposure, but it doesn't completely strip away that cash flow that they've grown so accustomed to over the years, right? Like a lot of these people are buying these parks from, it's their sole source of income, or it has become their sole source of income. And so having that just go completely away is a lot of times very challenging. And so it allows them to, essentially continue with ongoing payments, mitigate their capital gains exposure, and really make more money at the end of the deal. Over whether it be a 3 or 5 year span, or maybe longer than that, they make more money altogether on the deal from the interest income combined with the principal.
Absolutely.
So it's really a win-win. We try to look at each seller individually. It's on a case-by-case basis. We really try to meet their needs. I mean, it's what we try to do. And in every circumstance where we've actually been able to negotiate owner financing, it's really has been a win-win for both sides. And both parties are very, very happy, even years later. So
good. Yeah, it's a great vehicle. I know a lot of people who've purchased their properties with the owner financing, some portion of it. Maybe it's a second lien back, or depending on the asset, but that's really good. You mentioned you're a value add, so just kind of walk us through you mentioned you're a value add investor. So what typically, I know each property is going to be different, but kind of what's the run of the mill add, or the value that you're adding to a property once you acquire it?
Yeah, a lot of times it's operational challenges. The operating expense ratio is higher than what it should be, and that could be a result of maybe too many people on payroll, maybe the on-site manager, because most communities that we own, they have an actual on-site manager that live in the park or live near the park, and so they kind of run the day-to-day operation. So, that on-site manager, we purchased, I'll give you an example of a park that we just purchased up in New York. That on-site manager was making, I believe, close to $60,000 a year to run that community. Very nice community, very low maintenance, very nice homes, quality residents, mostly older senior citizens, pay on time, so very easy day-to-day operation. And the manager that we replaced the past manager with is basically making half, which is kind of the industry norm. I mean, he works, essentially 20 to 25 hours a week at the most, and makes, I believe, about $32,000 a year. So that's a big way for us to shave expenses. So, just really pay someone, what the job entails, not overpay them by double. Yeah.
It's a good business philosophy.
Yeah. I mean, collections challenges, it's pretty common. We buy from a mom and pop, not that deal per se, but it's pretty common to see that if a mom and pop has been running the park themselves, they get close with the residents. They start making exceptions. They start giving breaks. And so collections can get out of control pretty quickly. You give someone a break once, they stretch it out a little bit, give them a little bit more rope, they take even more, so, we'll go into a park and there'll be, roll, 50,000, 70,000 rolling balances that have accumulated over, could be a number of years even. And there could be a few people in there that just literally are you haven't paid in 2 months or 3 months. And so we go in and put a very black and white collections policy in place. And typically how we initiate that is we just wipe the slate clean. We kind of tell everyone like, hey, Christmas came early, just what's done is done. That's the past. But moving forward, here's what it's going to look like. And we're going to give everyone a break. Everyone starts from ground zero. And that typically weeds out pretty quickly those that just aren't be able to get on board, and normally there's like one or two that, even though you wipe away $6,000 that they owed, they just can't figure out how to make the $300 a month payment. And, we let it run its course. And so that's another big challenge that we see with mom and pop operators. Another one is mom and pops typically don't keep their rents up to market. They don't do a good job of, I would say, not necessarily being a professional operator, but just keeping up with the times, keeping yearly incremental increases to make up for inflation, rising costs associated with taxes, insurance, and such. Very common, we'll go into scenarios where the rents are 20, 30, 40, sometimes even 50 or 60% below what the market is, just because the operator hadn't raised it or hadn't consistently raised it over the years that they've owned and operated it. So that's typically pretty low hanging fruit to where we can go in and do a rent bump. We like to do improvements before we do rent bumps. And we like to go in and actually make improvements to the community and put some capital improvements in place, whether it be redoing roads, putting new signage in, fencing. If there's a lot of older dilapidated units that are in there, we'll go in and clean those up. If we don't own them, we'll go in and spend money cleaning them up. In fact, we just did that in a park up in Florida that we purchased. We only own 6 homes in this community. And so the remaining, I believe there's about 53 tenant-owned homes in this park. Lots of them were older. Lots of them had skirting that was kind of banged up. Lots of them had like rusty roofs on them. Lots of elderly senior citizen people on fixed incomes. And so we went in and budgeted, I believe, about $50,000 or $60,000. And we literally cool sealed everyone's roof, pressure washed everyone's home, fixed their driveway. Just did a lot of improvements to their home. Just to give them a better quality of life and to make the community look better altogether. After we did that, we did raise rent slightly in that park, and but it was well accepted because we spent so much money on the improvements. We brought the value and the overall quality of the park up many notches.
Absolutely. You're doing this for units that you don't even own. That's a good strategy. That's impressive to say the least. Wow. I'm wondering if you kind of mentioned earlier, if you, I don't remember exactly what you said, but kind of, if you knew then what you know now kind of scenario. Yeah. If someone was to come to you and say, Kevin, I'm thinking about doing some private lending, how could you put them off to make sure they get on the right foot? What kind of advice could you give them?
Education is really the foundation, right? And so, God, in today's world, Keith, it's so much easier than 20 years ago or whatever, 18 years ago when I got started. Back then, when I got started, there were still books and things of that nature, but there wasn't Amazon. You couldn't just go on and purchase, 20 books on the topic from all these like experts out in the field. You couldn't get podcasts for free, which is awesome.
Right.
And there wasn't just the library of information, free information out there for people to access. So I would say if someone has an interest in private lending, start with the education side. Listen to your podcast, listen to other podcasts that are out there on this topic, private lending topic. Go meet other private lenders in your local marketplace and have lunch, but take them to lunch, pick their brain. Have some very specific questions, really mine for data, obviously try to give some value to them as well. Don't just extract. You always want to give back as well. But just educate yourself, get to know the business. Determine that you actually have a passion for becoming a private lender. You'll find out if it really is the right path you should be taking. The only way you're going to figure that out is by diving in, both feet in the fire, man, and just immerse yourself in information. That would be my suggestion. There's lots of it out there. Dive in. What are you waiting for?
I can't agree. I don't think I can agree with you any more than that. That's the best way. But I really like that passion part of it, because if you got to find out quick if you have it or not, because if you don't waste your time, move on and go to something else.
That's it. There's a caveat there though. Tons of information, almost too much information, like overload. So give yourself a deadline of okay, for the next 4 months, I'm going to research, I'm going to learn as much as I can. But by X date, whether it's 6 months or it's 8 months, I'm going to take action, whatever that means to you. Maybe you've got $100,000 laying around, you want to lend it out. Well, give yourself a deadline to actually learn, but also take action and make something happen, right? Don't just be the guy that has a bunch of theory and it's like super smart and attending the local investment meetings, but literally has not done a deal yet. Get out there and take action.
We all know this, guys. Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. Great advice. So I know in your bio on your website, I'm going to start this over. First up, how do you say that word that you say you are an autodidact?
Yeah, that's right.
Autodidact. Okay.
I just enjoy learning, never ending education.
Okay. That's how I'm going to take it. So I'm not going to miss, because I intuitively, I knew what it meant, but I'm like, how the hell do I say that?
I screw up every time.
Yeah. Well, I know by looking at your bio on your website that you enjoy reading. So I'd like to know what is on your coffee table or your nightstand right now. What book or books are you going through?
So the ones that are on my coffee stand night table aren't necessarily the ones that I've read the most recently, which is kind of funny. I'm guilty as charged. I go through phases, Keith, and I would say that I definitely have not read as many books over this last 12 months than what I typically would read. And so I drive, I listen to audio. If I have long drives, I shouldn't say when I drive, I listen to audio books, but when I have long drives, extended drives, my house to my office is only like 10 minutes. And so and most of the time I have kids in my car before I drop them off to come to my office. So I don't really have a chance to listen to audiobooks as much as I used to. But to answer your question, I get to the point here. Traction is the last book that I read, which is the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's just really a structured system, a way to systemize your business and operate more efficiently. So the book is called Traction. That's the most recent book that I read. I would tell you that a book that I recently reread, which I've probably read 2 or 3 times now, is and it's a phenomenal book. It's called The Slight Edge, and the name of the author is Jeff Olson. And that's a phenomenal book. That was basically, I think I was turned on to by a good friend about 2 years ago. So it's a recent book, but that's a great one as well. And I've got a whole bookshelf here of, things I've read over the years. But, I like to say I try to read at least, I wish it was like once a month, but it's probably like 4 or 5 books a year now that I try to get through. I wish it was more, but that's about where it's at today.
Okay, well, I guess when you collect mobile home parks, the books kind of get squeezed out a little bit.
Yeah, right. No, I think it's more like when you have a 1 and 4-year-old that, the time gets squeezed out. That's what happens.
Yeah. Understood.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I get that. Mine are 8 and 10 now. So I'm able to do a podcast finally, or have some time to myself. So that's, they're a little more self-sufficient. So one of the things that I really like about your website, your show, and really what you've shared about your life with us is the way you give back. And I always like to say that you don't need to have money to lend, because you can lend time, you can lend compassion, you can lend an ear. So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you to give us a little glimpse of how do you give back.
Yeah, I tried to gear my charitable endeavors around things I enjoy, like hobbies I enjoy, and it makes it easy. It's really easy for us all just to stroke a check, and I'm not opposed to that, but I also like getting actively involved. And so one of the big things I do each and every year, unfortunately, Hurricane Irma this year had slightly different plans for this event that I put on each and every year. But I host I'm a big cyclist. I'm really passionate about cycling. It's one of my hobbies. And so I host a charity bike ride. This year was going to be I believe the 8th year that we've been putting it on, where basically myself, we have a staff of about 8 or 9 volunteers that help us out each year, and 65 other riders ride from the west coast of Florida, Fort Myers Beach, all the way down to Key West. It's 280 miles over 3 days. Each one of the riders has a fundraising minimum they have to meet. A lot of them exceed it, and basically all the proceeds from this, everything, minus the expenses, which are minimal, we donate to the Tiny Hands Foundation, which was founded by a close friend of mine, Rod Cleef. He's a good friend that's close by here. He founded that foundation about 15 years ago. And so essentially what we do is we provide food baskets and gifts to local families in need during the holiday season. So right before Christmas, we get names of families from the Boys and Girls Club, from local churches, other local organizations, and we deliver them food baskets with essentially turkey and all the fixings for an entire holiday meal, along with presents that they can wrap for their children. So, so they can actually have presents underneath that tree come Christmas morning. So that's one of the big ones I do on a yearly basis. We also do another bike ride in the middle of the year where it's called the Teddy Bear Brigade, kind of the same thing. It's a charity bike ride. We raise money through registration fees and go out and buy hundreds of teddy bears or thousands of teddy bears, and then give them to the local police department so that their patrolmen can stash a couple in the trunk, and when they ever get into a situation with that has a distressed child as part of that altercation, they can give that teddy bear to that child to help comfort them during that time of distress. So that's just a couple things I do that really, those two things they revolve around cycling or bicycling, because I really enjoy that. And then my wife and I try to volunteer. My wife's on a bunch of different boards. We go paint houses. We do a bunch of other things. So I'm just miscellaneous things throughout the year. Those are the two big events that I kind of head up, and I organize and manage.
Well, how can people find out more information about those events? Yeah.
So the bike ride, I've only got a website for the main bike ride that we do to Key West. It's called 72hourstokeywest.com, and it's a 72. So 72hourstokeywest.com. And they can find out more about that. I think we've raised, even this past year, we had to cancel the ride this past year due to Hurricane Irma, but we still ended up raising, I think, $15,000 or $16,000, even though we didn't even put the event on, which was pretty cool. But I think we've raised over, I think, about $150 or more $1,000, and have fed, I don't know how many families. It's probably about 20,000 families over the past 8 years that we've been doing it. So pretty awesome. We can see the immediate impact because these are families that are local in our area. I mean, they're in our immediate area. So we get to see the impact that it has on the local families. And it's a really cool thing. It's a lot of fun. I've met some incredible people, and we've helped, some incredible people as well.
That's great. And not to make light of it, but being, living in the Houston area, we're well versed in how Mother Nature can derail things.
Yeah.
So, Harvey, Irma, and Maria were the, bam, bam, bam this past year. So.
Yeah, it was a big whammy this year. Hopefully that means we got like 10 good years of smooth sailing.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really do. So, well, Kevin, before we wrap it up, I want to thank you so much for coming on. It means the world that you came on to my podcast and shared your knowledge and your time with us today. And before we say goodbye, how can people learn more about you? And it was actually, I jumped ahead on your website. Kevin will every Friday, Kevin makes 2 phone calls to anybody who signs up. And about 6 months ago, I signed up, and Kevin called, and just to talk shop about real estate or whatever. So I want to make sure that people have that opportunity to get in touch with you. So if you could, give the website, your social media, because I mean, Kevin is definitely it's so worth the time. I mean, to take that 30-minute phone call, it was it made my Friday. It was
I appreciate that.
I was
Yeah,
elated.
that
It was
awesome.
great. So please give us your web and your social,
Yep.
any other contact info.
Yeah, so my main website is kevinbupp.com, and as Keith had mentioned, I used to do four 30-minute slots on Fridays, but a couple of years ago I scaled it back to 2. But I've been doing that now for going on 4 years, which is it's been a lot of fun. I've spoken with tons and tons of cool people, Keith. I mean, over the year, I get to meet individuals like yourself, and it's just, I guess you could say that's another, not with you per se, but I mean, some of the other folks I've spoken to over time. They've got they're just trying to get into real estate, have questions like, I'm trying to do this, that, and the other. So I guess that's another way of giving back. I feel like, that's my time. And I love to help others, because honestly, I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it wasn't for David coming in my life and literally taking me underneath his wing. So I feel like it's all our God-given duty, you, me, and everyone else listening to the show, to help that next person, figure out what it is you're going to focus on. If you're going to be a private lender, once you become successful at that, you've got that next person that comes to you at a local RIA group or reaches out to you and they're asking for help, they're asking for, for you to answer a question or, just give some advice, give it to them, lend a hand, right?
Absolutely.
Because you honestly don't know who that person is going to be. That person, you should just do it because it's the right thing to do. But you also don't realize that some of those people that are reaching out could be your biggest ally down the road. I mean, they really could help you take your business to the next level. And that really comes back to your network. Your net worth is what your network is. And in any event, kevinbupp.com is my website. On that website, on the home page, on the right-hand side, there's a button. I think like 3/4 of the way down, there's a link that says schedule call with Kevin. That'll actually take you to my calendar link, and you can schedule one of those 30-minute slots. I do think it's booked out pretty far. I haven't looked at it. I make the call every Friday, but I never look to see how far it's booked out.
The first time I looked at it, it was like 4 months booked out.
Yeah.
And then I didn't sign up right away because what am I going to say? And then once I decided, okay, I'm going to podcast, I'm going to definitely sign up. It was already 6 months out at that point. So,
oh gosh,
yeah,
okay.
it is I think it's one of the best things, especially, for providing information to people who, are looking for a little direction. It's invaluable. I mean, you can't put a price on it.
I can tell you honestly, Keith, I mean, some of the people that I've spoken with, and I can't think of specific names, but over the last 3 years are now investors with us in our fund. I mean, and they reached out to me, maybe not asking for a specific piece of advice, but just to talk shop, they had their expertise. Maybe it wasn't the same thing I was doing, but that's how I initially met them. They listened to me through my podcast, but then they reached out to me. We had a phone call. And then, come time for us to do our investment fund, they reached out with an interest. And I don't know how many there are, but I know there's at least 1 or 2 that are in our fund today that are passive investors that I wouldn't say they're a result of that call, but I'm sure that gave like a personal touch. I mean, it allowed us to actually have a person-to-person conversation. And there's so much value in that on both sides, on both sides. So,
sure. Yeah, it was, like I said, I mean, when the phone rang and it said Clearwater, Florida, I'm like, he wasn't lying.
Yeah. So kevinbupp.com, that's the main website. You can contact me through there. My email address is kevin@kevinbupp.com. And then if they want to learn more about if you want to learn more about our syndication, I'll give you a little cheat sheet here. If you go to our website, our company website, sunrisecapitalinvestors.com, there's a link on the top right. I believe it says investors. If you click on that, that will take you to our secure investment portal. And you can create a free account. If you create a free account, it will allow you to actually download our private placement memorandum. So if you're bored and you want to read through I think it's 180 pages and you want to see what an actual syndication documents look like, at least ours, they can vary. They're not all boilerplate. But if you want some good reading material to learn about what it is we do, there you have it. A free way to access that.
Great. We'll put that in the show notes so that people can get over there. Mm-hmm. Kevin, thanks again. I really do appreciate it. This has been a great episode. I can't wait to start editing and get it out there to the world and let everybody listen to it. And thank you. Thank you for all that you've done for the investing community and your local community. And I hope to have you again. I hope to have you on the podcast again at some point.
It's been awesome, Keith. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right, take care. So that's going to do it for this episode 11 of the Private Lender Podcast. I'd like to thank Kevin Bupp for a great interview and dropping value bombs and golden nuggets and everything else. I'd also ask that you go to privatelenderpodcast.com/sponsors and visit the websites for our sponsors, 713 Houston Area Meetup, Networking Meetup, and the Rich Club, Realty Investment Club of Houston at richclub.org. Sorry, you can hear the dog shaking in the background. Anyway, just want to reiterate a few things that Kevin said about getting education. Did I say that right? Getting education? Anyway, but everything starts with education, but also giving back. So I've said before, you don't need money to be a lender. You can lend time, you can lend compassion, and you can lend support. And you can do that for any group or any cause out there, or you can do like Kevin and create events that support particular causes. So I highly recommend everybody go out and try to make the world that they live in a little bit better place, whatever that means to you. As long as you give back, I think that's a wonderful thing. And I'd like to steal from Ryan Stewman of the Hardcore Closer podcast. Now, that Hardcore Closer is a sales-oriented podcast that a friend of mine, Chad, introduced me to, and I've been listening to it even though I'm not in a sales position, so to speak, directly, a direct sales position. But Ryan says, if you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it. So I am going to ask if you're listening, you can hear my voice, and this is not your first episode, or even if it is your first episode to listen to, please go to iTunes, Google Play, or SoundCloud, whichever platform you use to listen to podcasts, and please leave a rating and review. And yeah, I would love to have a 5-star review and some glowing words, but I'd rather have an honest opinion to help shape the Private Lender podcast. So if there's something missing, something lacking, or something I could do better, please let me know, or just drop me a line at info@privatelenderpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. I'll see you guys on the podcast next week. And until then, I wish you happy lending.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Private Lender Podcast with your host, Keith Baker. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit privatelenderpodcast.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review, and we'll catch you next time.